All right, Nick, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, mate. I really appreciate you having me on the show. Good to be here.
Do you want to just start by telling us a little bit about the business?
Yeah, so Vudoo is an award-winning commerce media product. What is commerce media? Commerce media is a really large space which encompasses lots of different spaces, but probably most famously at the moment would be retail media, which is really one of the most exciting and fastest growing spaces in advertising, where the networks or the footprint of retailers have been turned into ad space and monetization. Yep. And we play kind of adjacent to that. So we offer a similar set of outcomes, but we do it on the open web and across other platforms. So if you think about retail media is really about on network, what Vudoo does is do everything off network. So It's an exciting space. We're an Australian software company born out of Melbourne, scaling globally. So yeah.
Can you put that into layman's terms in terms of what's a real life experience where people might interact with your company?
So we power the ability for digital ads, whether they are video, whether they are a display ad, whether it's an article about the top 10 coffee machines on a website. We allow for those moments when someone might be inspired to shop and go, hey, I actually want to buy that. And that's what the advertising and content's for. Instead of clicking through to a website, our technology allows for that consumer to shop right there by either our product presents a modal screen or a widget which comes up and allows the consumer to shop right there and go back to whatever they were doing. So what we're doing is we're radically reducing the need to click through to websites to shop, which has really been status quo for 25, 30 years.
Yeah. So you're removing the friction, right? So when you're in the middle of reading I don't know, I'm reading something about NBA basketball, for example, and I see something come up and so-and-so is wearing these new shoes. The idea would be, I can buy those shoes right there. And then while I'm looking at it, the photograph or whatever it is, while I'm
click
reading
on it,
buy,
that's it.
And keep on doing what I'm doing. So you're just removing friction.
Reducing the path to purchase.
Right. Okay. How did that all come about?
I come from e-commerce. So I was very early in e-commerce. Started in e-com in Australia was early. So it was about 2003, 2004. Then I started working in an agency around 2006 and started building out some of the first e-com websites for some of Australia's biggest retailers. And it was a real Wild West then. We were kind of learning it in the morning from the US and then selling it by lunchtime to retailers what we need to do. But I took some of the biggest retailers in Australia from online for the first time in commerce. And that's really my bread and butter and where my career. And then it was many years later that I became aware of interactive video and the ability to put an interface inside a video screen. And it just had this moment, where I just saw everything, the star of the line. I could see where the world was going very clearly. And I thought, this is you're going to see convergence of video and say static kind of one-way media, and you're going to see shoppable interfaces, and they're just going to be merged. Yeah, right. They're just going to come across, and we started seeing that in different areas. Like TikTok launched in 2016, clearly moving into TikTok Shop. I just had a moment where I saw that very clearly, and so that's what really inspired me to found the business.
Yeah, I want to dig into some of the business stuff in a second, but from a retailer perspective, how does this change in the future retail from a bricks and mortar stores perspective, and even from a website or an online, a traditional, I guess you can call it these days, a traditional online retailer now? How does this change the business model?
Yeah, that's a good question. Then you look at the business model today, retailers are spending billions on pulling audiences, consumers, customers to their platforms to transact. And there's a lot of waste. 38% of all shoppers would actually purchase the product if they didn't have to click through to the website. There's a change in consumers, and it's going to be a generational change. And it's being driven by large tech brands, the global brands such as Instagram, Meta's, TikTok. They're really changing a generation and what they expect and how they shop. And it's shopping where they want to shop, not shopping how the retailer wants them to shop. And so that's the business model change. The great thing for retailers and brands is it actually lifts performance. So we know that if you actually provide the ability for a consumer to shop at the point of inspiration, meaning they don't have to click away and click onto a custom journey, which is being tracked and measured by the retailer or by the publisher or the advertising agency, you allow them there and then to transact. your purchasing increases drastically. It is quite a big shift, but it's almost going to be out of the hands of a lot of retailers and of advertisers in time, because the world's getting smaller, and that's because of technology, and the big tech companies are driving this, and we're going to see more and more of it. But it's a great thing to lean into, because it's allowing your consumers to shop wherever they'd like to shop, and the technology's caught up.
So if I look at a retailer, where if you look at the bricks and mortar retailers, over many years, they're on the decline. That's a dying industry. I mean, there's always going to be probably some sort of market there for it, but it's declining.
I think it will change. I think that industry will shift to be more experience-based rather than, say, shelf-based shopping. Come in, find what we want, go. Brick and mortar touch points will become brand experiences. That's what will pull shoppers, pull consumers in to be more immersed within the brand physically. Yeah.
Right. So are you talking about things like augmented reality and things like that? Or
no,
is it
I'm talking about like physical
topic?
brick and mortar stores will become more experiential in their shopping experience, even more so than they are now, which will then attract an in real life experience. Then you'll see an amazing moment where you're going to have screens and touch points and digital in-store experiences connected to off-store, offline digital world. And there's a lot of really cool products that are allowing that to happen as well. You'll see that convergence even more so than now. Yeah.
What does it mean for online shops though? So my thinking before you sort of said all that was bricks and mortar retailers sort of declining, and then the online stores, are they going to decline as well? Because you don't need the online store, not in the same way as it's not a shop front anymore, because it's an engine room behind the scenes more.
Correct.
So yeah, okay.
It will, again, you'll see more of an experiential online experience in time. It's more about the brand or the retailer saying, hey, where are our checkouts? Where are we transacting? Let's actually break it down to the transaction. Where's the transaction happening? There's one happening in a brick and mortar store, and I might have, say, 4 stores in a capital city, just for argument's sake. And I have one online, and I've got a 24/7 shop. We say check out, and I check out that one there. Then where are all my other touch points? Well, I've got brand marketing, and then I've got performance marketing, and I have all these advertising. I have all these other retailer brand advertiser touch points that currently aren't shoppable.
Okay, so it's decentralized shopping now.
Correct. It's distributed commerce. It's about saying, hey, if I'm engaging in a touch point of your brand, I should be allowed the opportunity to purchase it right there at the point of inspiration, not take it away and then hopefully find my way back to the website or see some other messaging in a couple of weeks' time. I want it now. I don't want it where you show it to me. And if you show me a product and it's not shoppable, it's akin to saying, we've got a brick and mortar storefront here, and we'll open the door when we feel like it. Right? And some of the tenets of brick and mortar retailing, if you're a merchant, is you open at the same time and you close at the same time, 7 days a week. If you talk to old school retailers, that's one of the tenets of their business, right? The most successful retailers, rain, hail or shine, death in the family, it doesn't matter. They open at 7 a.m. and they close at 4, or they 9 to 5. Monday, it does not change. So if you decide as a brand or retailer, hey, I'm going to put some e-com infrastructure across all my touch points, the other thing is you can't turn it on and turn it off. You can't run it as a campaign and say, hey, we'll just run it for a bit. Does it perform? The shoppers will say, well, I could buy that pair of sneakers, those basketball boots. I could buy those last week, but now I can't. It's like having the door open, door shut, door open. So they're the conversations we're having. And I guess we had a big announcement this week with our global partnership with IPG Media Brands, their Connected Commerce arm, which is a global performance technology agency of that agency Holdco. And their whole proposition is always on commerce, because commerce in the early days, and probably still now, a lot of questions saying, well, a consumer's not going to buy that online. Well, it's not our place as a retailer, as a merchant, as a technologist or an agency to dictate how a shopper shops. It's our job to actually provide them the opportunity to shop whenever they feel like it, however they want to shop. And that's really the change that's coming as well.
It's interesting to understand the dynamics of the business and also more broadly that space in retail, because it's obviously changing the way people buy, it is, because people would buy that way if it was available now. And as it becomes more and more a part of the landscape of where they are, it becomes second nature.
And what we're finding is there's questions being asked saying, well, is this brand advertising or is it performance advertising? We're trying to get the brand here. And what we're finding through our own studies and our own research is that the interface-based architecture that sits across on top of an ad, which traditionally might have been an inspirational ad to inform you of those new pair of NBA sneakers, by putting a shoppable interface over the top of it, the engagement of that interface actually physically drives brand intent, brand recognition. And that harks back to what we're seeing being driven by big tech leaders like TikTok, like Instagram, that basically put interfaces across brand. And that's driving a new generation's kind of expectations around how they engage with the brand. I physically engage with the brand. I don't just look at it on a billboard. I can actually engage with it, and that lifts brand, which is great for retailers as well, because you're going to see some cost efficiencies come because you can actually drive double duty, which is I can get a brand uplift whilst I'm actually allowing consumers to shop if they feel like they would like to shop.
Yeah, right. And in terms of this business been going for 6-7 years now?
7 years.
And before that, you're in the digital space?
Yeah, so I had my own digital brand agency for about a couple of years. I did some really great work, some Victus games, Leica cameras. And then before that, I was in e-commerce. I was in an e-com agency for a long time. And I find myself in ad tech.
Yeah.
But the creative part, I really come from the e-com part. But now I'm bringing e-commerce into the creative and brand side of advertising.
What was the biggest challenge you faced doing this business compared to what you were doing before?
One of the biggest challenges was thinking that because I'd worked in e-commerce and technology where I had essentially been in the services business, where we'd been paid by the hour to deliver a product for a brand, that I could go and build a product. I'd build hundreds of thousands of products. There's only one, thinking that I could go and do this easily. It's just, they don't translate. One is a services-based business and one is a product-based business. And it was a steep learning curve. And I made many mistakes. I always joke about how I'll have a memoir one day. There'll just be so many mistakes by Nick Morgan. Yeah, but a services-based business and running a services-based business model is very, very different to a product-based business model. Very different.
What's the biggest difference that was the most confronting that you didn't realize?
The length of time it would take to get traction and also to start delivering revenue really took a long time. We weren't a hyper-growth business. In some ways, I wish I had built a better version of what the company was already using. In some way, our product has always been very visionary. And so we've always been educating as much as selling. And that always takes longer. And it harks back to something I learned very early on in my career from a friend's successful father, way back. It wasn't really a piece of wisdom, but a statement that he made to me one day, which I always think about, which is it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. It just doesn't happen as fast as you think it's going to happen. I think it's a bit of a false kind of read in the market, peddled by kind of financial media, that they zero in on the anomalies when there's, 100 other businesses that are taking much, much longer to get there, because it'll always take twice to 3 times as long.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And that is very true. I think I said this the other day in another discussion where it was around that Bill Gates quote, I think it is, where it says we overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in 10. And it's so true, right? And when you think long term, it changes the way you do things because you can become more patient. Once you understand it's going to longer, you become more patient in your mindset. Doesn't mean you don't work as hard or try to get things done as quickly, but it does change your mindset. You become more patient and make better decisions, I think, than when you try and get things done with a shorter term time frame.
And unfortunately, I think it also comes with age.
Yeah, you've got to learn those things, right? It doesn't just...
You've got to learn these things, and I've learned them. The younger you are, the less you are likely to be told. And so the older you get, the wiser you are to actually listening. And then you learn these things that actually it does take a longer. And that impacts a lot of your decision making. Right? Tactical decision making as well.
What do you think your biggest strength is as a leader within the business?
I just call myself the glue most of the time. So honestly, I think I'd say it was twofold. One of my strengths is being able to articulate my vision, and being able to articulate vision to investors, to a board, to executive leadership to the broader team is really important because they need to know where they're going, especially if I'm asking a lot of them at every level and where you're starting from scratch and you're unprofitable and you're raising capital, stay alive. And you've really got to be able to articulate your vision clearly. And you articulate it differently. The way that I articulate it to an investor, a high net worth individual versus an institutional investor is very different. Same vision, but the way that you communicate it. The way that I communicate that to my broader team internally when I'm in all hands on a Monday, I articulate it in a certain way. Yeah. So I'm communicating the same vision, but it's the way I deliver it. So I think that's one of my key strengths. And I think then coupled with that is identifying talent and fostering talent. I haven't always made the great decision in hiring, and that's just part of the course. However, I think that fostering talent is something that I find really rewarding. I love an underdog. I love someone who's grinding away to prove themselves. And I love giving them the opportunity to grow and giving them the platform to do that. I love fostering talent. So I think that would be probably two of my strengths.
And in terms of that fostering talent, was that something that is a strength now? Was it always a strength? You said you didn't always...
Employing people is really hard. Looking back on it now, I was quite fast and flippant about it. Like, yep, that's right. Even not in Vudoo, in other businesses. By the time I started Vudoo and brought my process and system kind of into Vudoo, I had really stretched it out. It was like, this needs to be really carefully proper HR process, and there's different gates, and everyone needs to actually deliver and prove themselves through this process to ensure, because what you're doing there is you're bringing someone into your business, and culture to me is the most important. Nothing compares. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Absolutely. So I have to protect that as best I can. So one of the things that makes me really nervous is hiring people, because I'm bringing an unknown quantity into a team, high-performing elite team who are working really hard, who have a clear vision. And so I'm bringing in unknown quantity into that, and I'm hoping that they can actually join and add to that. Sometimes it doesn't work. It happens. When the magic's there and it is the right hire, I love getting behind those individuals and helping them be better. I always talk about, what are you going to do after Vudoo? We talk about that in the early days. Like, let's be realistic. Voodoo's not the end. You might be here for 2 years, 3 years, 6 years, 7 years. But whilst you're here, I want to make you better. I think if you're really honest about have conversations like that, you get actually more out of people, because they'll lean into you because they realize that you do actually have their best interest at heart.
Not many people would talk about the post-working here discussion in the early days, right? Because you don't talk about that. It's, you're here forever, and it's not realistic.
It's not realistic.
Yeah.
We're all on a path somewhere. So where are you going? Mm-hmm. Can I help you get to that? And I think it's a really honest conversation when a founder says to a team member coming in and saying, hey, what's your vision? This is my vision. I made my bed and I want you to help me achieve my goals. What is it that I can help to achieve you? And when you have a really frank conversation like that, I find like it just rallies people. And they're like, I'm going to give everything I've got here. And I recognize you're going to give me everything I got. We're not here from 7 a.m, 11 o'clock at night, slaving away. Mm-hmm. But if I need people to dig deep, the team around here will do what they need to do to get shit done. Yeah. And I think that's because they know that I appreciate it, and that's honest and authentic, because I talk about how can I make you better and where you're going next.
When did you start having those conversations with people? When did you realize that was worth discussing up front or early on?
I realized that I had a co-founder at Vudoo, and we both agreed that a single vision was the best approach. So after the first couple of years, we parted ways. He's still a very big supporter, and we're still very, very close. He's a great support. But clear that a single vision was required. So when I made that decision, then really had to kind of back myself, because it's probably one of my greatest mistakes, which is I didn't back myself early enough in my career. I always thought I need someone else to do this. Yeah. And when I had lots of people over the years tell me, I remember one specifically, an accountant once said, why don't you do this? I'm like, oh, I couldn't do this. So when I actually was comfortable enough to back myself, which on reflection was probably one of the darkest moments in Vudoo's history, which is COVID hit. We had $1 million pipeline evaporate. I was running out of capital. Co-founder left. Hard lockdown in Melbourne, and I decided I'm going to take this. I'm going to take all this on board by myself. Like, I backed myself. I was just having honest conversations and honest thoughts. Going, I'm just going to be super frank with people, because it's pretty dark at the moment. And so I've always, from that moment, not that I wasn't transparent before, and not that I wasn't employing really transparent HR practices. I just thought from then on, can't get any worse than this.
Yeah.
It's got to be everything up from here, right? So I just decided to be really frank and straight with people as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, because they're realistic decisions, then realistic things that people come up against, because everyone is, like you say, on their own path. So it just makes complete sense to talk about, look, we'd love for you to be here forever and do what you do and love it here, but sometimes you're going to find that you outgrow here, and hopefully you do. You know, we want to grow fast, but hopefully you grow faster. Like, this is great.
Spot on. And I think it's a delusional by some business leaders, and I think it's egotistical to think, oh, you're going to be here forever. I'm going to, we're going to do this together, and people have their own lives. This is a paycheck. Yeah. It's a paycheck to pay for a rent or mortgage or daycare fees. That's what it is. It's their career. And you just got to be really very realistic about that. So whilst you're here, give me everything you've got. How can I get you where you want to go?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. You talked about your vision and how you articulate that differently. What's some of the nuance with that, Nick, in terms of how that sort of might play out, or the differences?
I think it comes down to vernacular and language. I've learned to be able to speak to a room of 30 investors and for 3 hours straight and pitch my vision and field questions and refer to capital events and exits and things. Whereas if I talk to the team about where we're going, if we sold the business and what does that mean, or do we have we've got enough runway, cash in the bank to pay our salaries for 12 months. Like it's just different ways that you articulate yourself, which I think is still the same message, but I've just learned to be a better communicator around what the vision is for the business.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And in terms of capital and that sort of stuff, have you raised capital from investors along the way? And how does that sort of look? What can you tell us about that sort of process, amounts, if that's relevant, or an experience with who you talk to and why?
Yeah, look, we've raised close to 20 million in capital, and we haven't followed a traditional startup funding approach or path. I think that's probably my chairman, Grant Pestel's influence as well from an early days. I explored, traditional pathways, which would be, venture capitalists, which is really the backbone of, startup and tech startup globally. I find that model to be a little jarring with relation to startups. It really works well for hyper growth for all costs' sake, and drive a valuation, which then different institutions can get in and out different values and make fast money. In reality, things take longer. In reality, you need belief. And in reality, I want to be seen as a business, not just a product to make a whole bunch of analysts money. And so that's just my personal position. And so we have raised capital from high net worth individuals, family offices, mainly from Western Australia. And the reason being is they're actually super patient. If you speak to high net individuals, say a family office that's made a lot of money out of gold, that's a very patient family. That's a very patient set of people. It's a tough game and it can take a long time. They tend to back a sense of kind of pioneering individuals. There's a go-getter attitude there. I think that there's a big opportunity for more of West Australian capital to fund in Australia's tech scene, because I think it fits it well.
I think there's a cultural fit there with the mindset of
cultural fit.
West Australian investors, just from a mining sector perspective, boom bust, that type of mentality. Back then, they understand that not everything works. It's higher risk, higher reward typically, but it's also patient capital. It's not about fast, do this and exit. It's about building infrastructure that goes with the mines and goes whatever. So there's a mindset there that understands a lot of the stuff that is analogous to new industries.
Absolutely. My biggest investor is a self-made individual out of Perth. He's not on any rich list. You'd never find him on one, but he would easily sit at the top of many. Not interested, is focused on his family. He's made his money, loves going fishing. He loves backing businesses and backing young, entrepreneurs. The guy's in his 70s, I'm in my 40s, so I think I'm youngish. He loves to see the grit and the grind because he's done that. And so he's like, and I've catch up with him and give him an update, and I'll talk about the things we failed at. And he said, I could have told you that. I was waiting for that to happen, because he's been there, done that. I find it quite inspiring. I find it really quite liberating raising capital from individuals that have been there, done that, rather than, say, a room full of analysts that have have come out of university and they don't know what running a business is. They think running a business is on a spreadsheet.
I was going to say they've made it all work on a spreadsheet, but the real world's different. Whereas some of the people, and I know the types of people you're talking about, they might not even know how to use a spreadsheet, and that doesn't really matter.
No. I did a prezzo once to a guy. He was on his phone having a cigarette on the street, and he was so apologetic because he couldn't get the Zoom to work. And I ended up catching up with him when I was over there, and he was salt to the earth. He had worked his ass off and had become very successful, but it had taken a long time. Yeah. And so he's not looking for a fast return. He's looking for safe haven. He's looking to back an individual who will do whatever it takes to succeed and who have an inherent belief in themselves. And he wants to put his money into that because he gets a better return. He knows it's risky. She knows it's risky. And they're willing to park it there and willing to wait.
Yeah. How important are people in terms of the advisors and the people you bring in, like your chairman, Grant Pestel, who we both know, he's a great guy. How important are people like that when you bring them into these key positions within the company?
Super important. I haven't brought a lot in. I have a board that I put in place 3 years ago, and we've only just had 2 retire and 2 new board members, and we're about to notify investor base of that. I learned a while ago that the decisions are on me. I think sometimes founders maybe that don't have enough confidence or haven't recognized that they need to back themselves.
Yep.
So they look to individual stakeholders, people in their periphery they've brought in, and they also look to their advisors and their accountants and this and that. They look to make decisions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
When they don't realize that you need to draw upon the information from your solicitors and your IP, and you draw upon that information. I draw upon all that information.
You're the decision maker.
I'm the decision maker.
Yeah.
And it's my commercial decision. And I learned that probably in the first couple of years of running this business. It took me a while, to really understand what that means, which is when I did actually really understand that, actually allowed me to run faster and harder. Yeah. Because I can look at something and go, yeah, I appreciate all of that, but we're going to do that. And Grant helps me on those really big decisions where I really need to have a sounding board, right? I really need, I'm very aware that I have raised capital from hardworking family offices, and I need to return it with a return.
Yep.
And it's in the investor's best interest that I actually have a lens over me as well. And that's what the board is, right? The board's not there to drive and grind me out. And the board's there to be a kind of a lens over the top of me to ensure fiduciary we're doing the right thing, of course, but also to ensure that I can make commercial decisions, which once I've actually fleshed them out, if I'm not sure on something or there's a big decision that we want to be careful we make, the board will help me make that decision ourselves. But I'm very mindful that I have a lot of advisors around me, but it comes down to the decisions I make and listening to them, but I don't look to them for the decision making. That's up to me.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical point that often people forget, because it applies to business, it applies to investment, and it applies to life. I mean, I've looked at, and I've been in different firms when I was younger where we manage money for people. And at the end of the day, I always say to my clients when we're managing their money and a portfolio is, we advise you, you've got to make the decision in the end. So you can't sort of abdicate the responsibility of making a decision, just go, oh yeah, if you think that's good, let's do it. You really need to understand it, because no one cares about your money as much as you do, right? Because if something goes wrong, that's not a great outcome for a client, but if the client's money, and it's the same I remember with our kids when they were younger, like when you go to the doctors and there was something happening or whatever it might be, it dawned on me that there's the same sort of principle where when you're talking to doctors and experts or something like that about something, no one cares about your kid as much as you, right? And so when it comes to that, yeah, you listen to a lot of people will abdicate their responsibility on that and just defer to doctors and that type of thing on everything. But when you realize that actually no one cares about that kid as much as I do, they might have a bad day or something else, but that's everything. So
Correct.
It applies across not just businesses and boards, but every aspect.
You're spot on. And I think that it probably took the business environment to instill that in me, to be able to understand that it actually does work. Like, I make those decisions now in life. Like, thanks for that. Appreciate that. We're going to do this. What's right for us? It's my decision, impacts me and my family, and I need to take responsibility for that.
It's a valuable mindset, and it's too easy sometimes for things to be like, well, the experts know. Well, yeah, but your life and your decisions, you got to take that responsibility, like you say, because it matters. Yeah,
and the experts, sometimes experts are providing advice in a vacuum, right?
Yeah,
they're not providing advice holistically and across. Whereas in business, I'm sitting in a 30,000-foot view, and I'm not involved in certain things, tactical things in the business, strategically, so that when it comes to me, I see things that they can't see. I'm like, we missed this, make sure we do that. It's the same thing in decision making.
Yeah. In terms of the next phase of the business, what are the most important things as you look forward in terms of what you're trying to do?
Look, the next critical phase for us is scaling. We've just established an office in San Francisco and leadership there, and we've been onboarding that individual, and we're really excited. We spent time with him in 3 different geos. He spent time here in Melbourne with the team, and he is really culturally aligned on every level of what we're trying to do, and it's very culturally aligned to our values, which is most important. So it's about supporting that individual and then supporting the team that he puts in place, and then doing the same in the UK. So we will be appointing an MD in the UK, and that's taking some time. I'm taking my time to find the right individual. So it's about putting teams under those and backing those and providing as much support so that they can be successful, and availing myself to them, because they need to draw upon information and knowledge that I have. They also need to be able to prop me up in market. They need to put me on panels. They need to use me to their advantage to help grow their markets. So that's being prepared to do that, because that's taxing, because I'm Melbourne based and I'm not sitting here in New York. Yeah. So I think it's about us as adjusting as a company and leaning into what scaling actually means. And for me, scaling is about supporting those new territories.
Yeah. How many people in the business now, Nick?
About 35 plus. We've only just put in leadership in San Francisco, leader in APAC, leader about to be announced soon in UK. So it's early, but then we'll build out teams under those, and we'll have another team in New York. So the business will, over the next 12 months, the business will probably double in headcount.
Yeah, okay. And when you look at other people in business, who are the types of leaders or people that inspire you in business, or you look at and admire the sorts of things that they've done?
It's interesting because different individuals have inspired me at different moments. Someone asked me the other day, they said, what keeps you up at night? I said, what keeps me up at night now is not what used to keep me up at night. It changes.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So I'm still getting kept up at night. This is something that just changes. I think the inspiration from individuals depends on who as well. Like, there's some pretty dark times in the early days where I dug deep and read a lot of books by a lot of historical figures.
Yeah.
I don't know why, I just lean into it. But recently I have been really inspired and blown away by the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang. If you want an example of transparency, if you've listened to some of his talks and some of the interviews he's had recently, like with the Stanford grads, he is just absolutely brutal on honesty. Yeah. One of his quotes, which is, I wish upon you ample doses of pain and suffering.
Yeah, right.
To be successful, because it breeds character. And I love that he sat in front of a whole bunch of people and he said, they were talking about what job would you do? And he said, I've cleaned more toilets than this whole room combined. And I'm running almost the most valuable company in the world, and I've cleaned more toilets than all of you. There's nothing that I won't do. And I just find that level of humility and careful consideration and honesty, that's what I gravitate to. So I'm finding that, and he's really inspiring.
It's fascinating, that part of what creates and drives success. I wrote a note a few weeks ago on that sort of that topic, and the sort of thing that strikes me as a pattern within that is that you have people who achieve success. It's often driven by their setbacks. It's often driven by their failures, and that some people might be defeated by it, but the ones who end up successful are the ones who are fueled by it. It doesn't define them. They take it, they hate it, they go through that pain, and that's the ample pain and suffering that he's referring to. Is that if you're got the right mindset, you use it as fuel to get to the next step. And so, yeah, there's a fascinating relationship there between the hardship and the success.
Yeah, look, and he absolutely, and he speaks to, I think he was saying, I'm paraphrasing here, that people with high expectations have low resilience. If I've got that right, I might have it wrong. But I think resilience is not something you're not born with resilience, I don't believe. I think it comes through nurture and experience. Like, I was raised by a single professional mum, and if she didn't work, we literally didn't eat. And I didn't realize, I went to a private school. She was very successful in her own right, but like a job's a job, right? Even though she was doing well, we grew up in regional Victoria. So I went to a good school, we had a home, and she had a nice car, but she made all of that happen herself. She didn't receive any support from my father, from family. So I was raised in a home where mum didn't work, we didn't eat. And I didn't know at the time, but in reflection, I realize that now. And so what absolutely instilled in me, and that's something my wife and I sometimes kind of butt heads on, is I put work first. I can't help it, because if mum didn't put work first, we didn't eat. We didn't have clothes. Mum always put work first. Work comes first, and then we have what we have. Whereas, my wife's like, they've got to put family first. And so we butted heads a lot, because it's inherent in me. I'm conditioned. Because my conditioning is, well, I am putting family first by putting work.
By doing that, yeah. It's all individual-based paradigms, right?
Yeah. So I think environments of hardship and growing up, things weren't always if things were quite tough at very different times. And I had to make my own money from a very young, I was an entrepreneur, very young age.
Yeah, right.
And I couldn't get a job. So then I would have a small business and I would make stuff and sell it and do whatever I could.
Yeah. And coming from that mindset, did you have mentors along the way, or?
Yeah, I did. I kind of sought them out because my father lived in another state and I didn't really have a lot to do with him. I naturally, again, on reflection, I naturally sought out father figures and family friends of ours who were successful in their own right. I kind of gravitated to, and I learned a lot. Family friend who had who was great, a winemaker. Another one who was very agriculturalists and farmers, who I learned a lot from. Whilst I was milking cows and walking the cows into the dairy, he was imparting a lot of kind of business knowledge to me. Well, to both his son and me, and his son kind of didn't really absorb it, which we joke about now, whereas I was like all ears. So, yeah.
Interesting. A couple of quick ones just to finish off. I'll go through any favorite business books you've got, favorite quotes or on business or leadership, life, and also the best advice you've been given.
Yeah. So look, I think that the quote is that Jensen Huang one. I can't get out of my head. Ample doses of pain and suffering. It says everything for me. Love it. Right. So book wise, I've read lots, but when I get asked that question, the one that always comes to the top of mind for me is a book by David Epstein called Range. And it's about how generalists are successful in a specialized world, where being a generalist and being able to work across a diverse range of categories or divisions or areas of a business actually allows you to actually be super successful rather than just specializing on one. That really resonates with me. And I've read that book. I've got that book and I've listened to it a few times too.
And best advice you've been given?
One of my board members keeps reiterating to me that he says, doesn't matter how much you plan for it, you will be surprised where your revenue comes from. And I always find that isn't that a failure of me if I don't have a business model like this? I'm making this and we're selling that. I know exactly, but it all starts to make sense now because we really, really shifted the business to sell into a different customer last year. We were selling into this customer. Now we're selling into that customer. I had never, at one point in the business of Vudoo, I told myself that we would never sell to that type of customer. It didn't make sense to me. And now we're finding that customer is actually is going to get the greatest reward from our product. And so he's right. As you become successful, it's interesting to understand where your revenue is actually going to come from, and it might not be where you think.
Yeah, right. Fascinating. Nick, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciated it. Loved your insights and hearing about the journey, and looking forward to the next chapters.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time.
No worries.